Welcome to Seven Figure Fitness Business with your hosts. I'm Andrew P. and this is Andrew G.
Hey guys.
All right, so today's topic of conversation, we're going to be talking about the art of conversation itself with your prospective clients. Otherwise, it could be known as direct messaging. And this is incredibly important because for us, I know, Andrew, that you've basically revolutionized this department for us to make sure that a much larger percentage of people that we book in for calls show up. Now, I'm really interested about how you go about this process.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I think that a lot of people in this space have just been going after automation. And as a result, what they're finding is the quality of their leads, their prospects are declining. And what we're doing here is we found the lost art of a one-to-one conversation. And what that does is it allows people to build a connection. It allows you to build trust. And when there's that level of built trust, your prospect is going to show up for that phone call. They're going to want what you've got, and they're going to ultimately close.
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the things that every business owner has to do is essentially look for ways to innovate so that they're constantly improving their efficiency and effectiveness in the market. A lot of fitness business owners are dealing with Facebook kind of creating challenges for them. One of the best ways that you've actually innovated for our company is by creating this messenger division so that the sales team, which I am a part of, we're spoiled. We get a high volume of calls, but they're also incredibly good quality because these people know about us and they're very excited for the call. So how do you actually go about taking somebody through that process of getting them where they don't really know who we are and getting them to the point where they're actually excited for their sales appointment?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing is, there's three different platforms we can really work off. Mm-hmm. The first is your Facebook personal profile, right? And on the Facebook personal profile, that's where most people are going to be doing their organic from. They're going to be having they're going to be posting your material and then having a conversation with future prospects. Yep. The second is the business page. And we primarily use the business page because we're running paid ads and we're sending people to that business page, often using like a messenger bot such as ManyChat, where that conversation is taking place. And the third one, which we're doing, which I haven't seen too many people do at the moment, is actually a texting system where we take people straight to a landing page, we collect their details on page one, and then we actually have a conversation via text message.
Yeah. And so, and also we're going to break this down in more detail soon, but, I know that one of our biggest ways of generating leads, of course, is the 7-day challenge. And a lot of the people, when they join the challenge, they're immediately getting spoken to by our team of messengers so that they're getting warmed up to want a phone call. So, explain that process a little bit.
Yeah. So, there's a couple of options there. Obviously we have a team, but starting out, we were doing this ourselves initially, or, our staff. And what happens in a 7-day challenge is you're inviting people into that group. When you've got people into that group, there's, as I just said, there are 3 different ways you can communicate with them. You could add them as a friend and start a one-to-one conversation with them and book them in while they're doing the 7-day challenge or at the end of it. With that, you might have taken them to a messenger bot first. We run an ad to a messenger bot, or you have an opt-in for them to join your messenger bot partway through that challenge. And then, of course, the third is you might send them straight to a landing page and then you can text message them and continue on that process. But the entire thing with a 7-day challenge is that you're using this to build up that trust. So what I like to think of it is the 7-day challenge is conversion tool number 1, and a conversion tool being something that delivers value that makes your prospect want what you've got. And the second is that conversation. And in the conversation, we're really, it's that relationship that we're building. And at the end of the day, if you've had a one-to-one conversation with someone and then they decide to not show up to your call, they no-show you, at the end of the day, they're just an asshole.
I know that with our team, we have it pretty dialed in these days. And that's something that, everyone will aspire to. But what this does is it really does mean that we get a high percentage of people showing up. And in terms of the return of the financial aspect of the business, it's huge because you need to get people showing up for the calls. But our sales team has also noticed a distinct difference in the quality of the sales conversations because these people have already been somewhat warmed up for the call. So it's such a powerful thing when it comes to efficiency in the business, making sure that you're not wasting yours or your staff's time, but it's incredibly important for the profitability and the cash flow of the business as well.
Yeah, that's it. Like, and everyone in the business is kept happy, right? The sales team, they're getting better quality leads. They're happy. They're making more money. And the way the way I kind of think of it as, and I didn't say this before, is it's kind of a little bit like Tinder or a dating app, right? What you're doing. Yeah, it is, because you're having this pre-conversation. Like, the value that's delivered is they've seen all the photos, right? They've read your profile, what you have to say. Then a conversation takes place, and they're deciding based on that conversation whether they're going to show up to that phone call and talk to you.
Yeah, this is a huge thing. It's such a nuanced skill conversing with people,
Yeah.
be it in person, be it behind, a keyboard or a phone.
And
And I think a lot of people make a mistake with this because there's so many people that, following your analogy, that basically just turn up to someone and say, "Hi, I'm Andrew. Let's go home tonight." And that's the same thing. People are just trying to book in a sales call straight away. And there's a lot more to it than that. How do you suggest that people actually go about that conversation so that it becomes, I guess, more enticing and it feels more genuine to the prospect?
Yeah, like, you nailed it on the head there. There's a definite art to having a conversation.
Yeah.
I think, well, in the show notes today, I know that you're going to have access to the questions that we ask in our script. And that's a bit of a starting point. But the art of this conversation, like, you can't just pick it up overnight. Just the same way, the conversation has to lead somewhere. There's a skill to it. There's a structure, and there's a way that you slowly move from just meeting them to actually getting them to want to book in with you. So, I've seen many people, during a process, coaching clients and so forth, where they think that they can just message people, themselves without a strategy, and then it just goes absolutely nowhere and doesn't work.
Yeah. Like, so with sales, for example, we get people up to scratch so much faster because we actually have a script, right? So we can take people who are less trained and get them up to scratch faster. I know that you have a very dialed in and road tested messenger script. How important is it, do you think, to actually script out this process to an extent?
Yeah, it's super important. And as the business owner, you might be able to get away with messaging people if you've got a basic script. Well, you probably can. You can probably do it really well after spending a bit of time doing it if you have a great script. But, you're not going to want to do that forever, right? As a business owner, it's pretty much the bottom of the barrel task, sitting there, DMing people. And, at some stage, you're going to want to bring on staff, right? And your staff have to be able to replicate what you're thinking, because you've got this vision as a business owner. You know exactly what your business stands for, who it is, etc. But you need that script to pass it on. And the same way as in sales, and the same way, like, for us, we've got a team of 26 virtual assistants, of which probably about 18 of them are all day, all night messaging people back and forth. So not only the next level of the script is being able for that to be used by a team offshore who English may not necessarily be their first language.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in and say that when we were getting started with Hypo, there was nothing that got me more in trouble with Han, my wife, than messaging people and doing all the organic stuff. Because, of course, we had to do that stuff ourselves in the beginning, and we were messaging people. And I can say this without any doubt in my mind, is that when you're winging it, it's a lot more time consuming than what I've seen occur with the script. A script means that you get it a lot more consistent. It's a proven system. It's dialed in. There's no additional fluff. But the other thing, and it goes without saying, it can't be stressed enough, is that once you have a system, you're eventually able to put someone else in charge of that system and move yourself up to more important tasks. So from what I've experienced, having a proven script or process is absolutely essential. And you do have that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's definitely been my world in the business, but there are plenty of businesses out there using a similar system where this is actually part of the sales division. And we've talked about that back and forth as to whether it should be something that I'm running or something that you're running.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, so with you actually giving in the show notes today a version of the questions that we offer, I think that that's an incredibly high value thing, because a lot of people, if they don't know how to go about that art of DM conversing with the prospects, they're going to basically get a roadmap that's going to allow them to kind of move forward at a rapid pace. And then they can at least get a really clear structure to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to do more than that, because, I actually want to run through step by step what the questions are and the strategy that we use to get each prospect along each step of the funnel. And one of the things about this is we've tried and tested everything, different questions, the way they're asked, et cetera, to make sure that we're optimizing step by step that the prospects are getting through the funnel and on the phone.
So that's the power of this script, because it has been tested. I mean, I know how many sales calls we get on approximately per week. How many messaging conversations does our team actually have every single week on average?
10 times the amount of bookings.
Right.
So, from a conversation started, we're probably 1 in 10 people get booked in, which is really, really good considering that it's all coming from cold traffic.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but we're probably getting on about 1,000 messenger conversations every single week. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000 messenger conversations. And, that's why we need such a big team to handle all those conversations.
The reason I'm bringing up that point is that is an incredibly well-tested script. There's not going to be many fitness scripts, if any, that have been tested at that level. So this is going to be an exceptional resource. So the next thing I want to do then is, you mentioned that you were going to break down the types of questions that you actually ask and why you've chosen to use them. And I'm also more than happy to discuss the types of things that you've actually removed because you found them to be obsolete. But let's start with the useful stuff first. Like, what are the types of questions if you want to sort of break through that process or break down that process?
Yeah, well, the first thing about this script is people need to know that they're talking to a real person. So when you're messaging off your personal profile, and this is probably one of the steps that's slightly different for each, but when we're talking about the personal profile, generally people will believe it's you because it's your personal profile and the conversation's fine, but you need to be elaborate enough to let them know that, hey, you've noticed something about them or you've acknowledged something about them so that they think, oh yeah, I'm talking to someone who has a brain, right?
So now, on this point, what would be an example of something just really basic?
Yeah, you could say something about someone's profile. Like you can see them lifting weights and go, gee, are they 100 kilo dumbbells you're lifting, right?
Okay, sure, gotcha.
Just make an acknowledgement about something that they're actually doing. Now, for us, because we're running paid traffic and we're mostly going down the business profile page, what we do is we actually send them a message that says, hey, Jenny, you're talking to me, Andrew, I'm not a bot anymore, et cetera, so that people actually know, because they know they've been talking to a bot before that, because we've taken them through ManyChat and we just have to make some sort of silly remark. You're talking to me, Andrew, a real person with a double emoji. What's your number one goal and why would you like to achieve it is the question that we ask, right? So, whether it's organic or whether it's that, or whether it's a text message, you're pretty much going all to the same place. You're going to ask someone, what are your goals and why do you want to achieve them? Now, that message, obviously, it has two parts. Obviously, we want to know about their goals because we're asking our prospect to think about what it is that they want to achieve. And then why, it's just like, taking them to a place where they're justifying to themselves, what that is. So we're creating pain. And this is effectively a mini sales call. Right?
Yeah. So basically what you're trying to do is actually make it so initially it's engaging to them, because we know that people care more about themselves and they care about us. So what you're doing is you're actually giving them a platform where they can talk about things that are actually important to them and thus draw them into the conversation.
Yeah, that's correct. Correct. And I will just say this, like with all these, all of these messages, they're being pre-framed by something, which is a free 7-day challenge, or they're being pre-framed by the fact, hey, 22-week program, because they've got to have something that we're pushing people towards. There's always some form of offer, which has to be congruent with what we're saying. So what happens next is they answer that question. And then we go, hey, what are you struggling with? Right. So people then answer that. The first thing is they have to acknowledge what's going into their goals. Oh, great goal. I have a client who lost 40 kilos as well, just over the last 3 months or the last 6 months or whatever it is. So, the conversation formula is you acknowledge what they've said, and make a statement and then ask the next question. Now, one of the arts to this is you never, ever want to have this conversation without going to the next point and asking the next question, because what you're doing, you're getting a response, you're saying something, but if you don't ask another question, so they're not asking you a question, they're just stopping. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make.
That's really smart, actually, because I noticed that conversations like this can go stale very quickly. So essentially, this is that art of conversation, is that you have to keep them engaged, because we do like to continue speaking about ourselves. And there is a concept in sales that is relevant in this just as well, called the self-disclosure loop, which is that once people start opening up and sharing things about themselves, their defenses and their walls start to fall away, and they start to actually get that sort of dopamine or that feel-good response as they start to share more. So every single time you're actually probing them to ask to sort of give just a little bit more about themselves, they're actually, in theory, going to be warming up into that conversation more and more and more. And it's going to be building empathy, and it's also going to be building trust, which is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So what will happen here is people will tell you exactly what they're struggling with. And then you can say to them, oh, look, I've had my struggles too, right? Yeah. And then your statement here is the struggles that you've been through. And this is your opportunity to really drop stuff that's vulnerable. Because when you share stuff about yourself, people want to share more stuff about themselves. So in our script, what we actually say here is I talk about having hypothyroidism and how that really affected me as a personal trainer. I went through, my identity suffered because here I was, an overweight personal trainer who had serious brain fog, couldn't even read a book anymore without forgetting the last page. Like, how are you in the industry with that? And I share that. And once that message has been shared, people just like, gee, and particularly when you hit the nail on the head, right? When you've actually met that response with what that person's struggles actually are, you build this super connection really, really fast.
This is really interesting. It's incredibly paralleled to a sales conversation. It literally is like a sales call done behind a keyboard, because that vulnerability story is so powerful to get people to actually connect and to want to share and engage. So I think it's really, really powerful. So after you've gone through that process of getting them to tell you about their goals, their why, and then obviously, you kind of summarizing or labeling back to them what they've said with a bit of vulnerability, where do you go from there?
Yeah. So at that stage, people have started to share a little bit more about themselves. It becomes, what have you tried in the past? So we've talked about some emotional stuff, and now we're going to go down the logical path. It's like, okay, so they might say that they've tried keto and they ate 90% of their foods as fats, or whatever they've done. When you acknowledge it, you go, oh, I've actually tried keto myself. It sucked. I was tired all the time and I couldn't hop out of bed, right? So, and, then for me, I'd write something like, with hypothyroidism, I found it particularly tough because I already had low energy and that affected me that way. So again, you're building on that. Now, the last thing that you ask at the end of that is just wondering, have you worked with anyone before? So what we're doing here is we're calling it, it's kind of like a escalation ladder where, you're asking questions about their goals, which are in the normal world, but you're then going to ask them, okay, have you worked with anyone before? Then you're going to ask them, oh, would you like to book a call and work with me? Which is kind of like where we're going at that stage. So we're building up, because if you just jumped on and started talking to this person, skipping the first 3-4 questions and said, hey, do you want to book a call with me? Like, what are they going to say? No, that's too fast. You've jumped too many steps.
That's exactly right. And it's the same response that people get out in a club, right? Like, when they just go and ask someone a super direct question, you don't just go up to someone and ask to make out on the dance floor, right? You're going to get slapped, right? So there is like a nuance and a finesse to it. And I think that's what a lot of people miss, is that from what I've heard, people are either complaining about conversations that never go anywhere. And I suspect a large part of that is because they're either not triggering the person on an emotional level. Maybe they're talking too much about themselves, or they keep on ending a response without asking a next question. So that's a huge part of it. And the other thing is, of course, there's some people that don't ask enough and they just basically say, hey, let's get on a call. So it's about finding that middle ground.
That's exactly right. And, there's ways of doing this where you can systemize it as such that you have really minimal work to actually do yourself. So you make generic responses, and this is the ninja thing that you can do. You're making a generic response that actually answers every single question and builds that relationship at the same time. So, like, for example, like what we were talking about with the struggling question, it's like, hey, I've struggled with this too. Boom, put in your statement, because then they're sharing their struggle, you're sharing your struggle, and the only thing you need to change is effectively one word, and then it becomes a copy paste job. But it's really important that story matches. So sometimes you might need 2 or 3 different stories to chuck in there based on what their struggle is.
Yeah. And this is something that I really want to know. What's the language that you use to actually get someone onto a phone call? Like, how do you ask that question about getting them onto a call?
Yeah. So at this stage, what you're doing is you've asked someone, have you worked with anyone before? You ask, they'll say yes or no. Why not? Right. And then how's your experience with them? That's the question there. And then we ask them, well, how important is it to you out of 10 that you achieve your goals? Right. And they'll say a 10. Awesome. I'd really like to chat to you more. And then we send them off. Would you be open to scheduling a call? So it's super soft, and it's like asking for their permission about that before we actually send off the link. So then they say yes or no. If they say no, we can handle some objections. I'm not going to go into full detail of that today because, but what they will do here is they'll then go, yes, I would. And we send them off the booking link.
Yeah. Now, not wanting to go off on too much of a tangent, but this is really important. I know a lot of people are going to want to know this. When somebody says, like, they're being very resistant, right? And they say, Andrew, I just want to know how much this is going to cost me. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So what we do, there's a number of different ways that we can handle it. We generally just say, hey, look, the program is customized uniquely for the individual. So the price of the program is going to vary based on, what your needs are. And then you just leave it at that. And sometimes people will just go, okay, cool. And they'll book a call. Other times people will ask more detailed questions and they're like, no, how much does it cost? Now, when someone asks that, we generally just respond and break it down into a daily amount. So if someone wants to know, for example, if someone goes, what's the price? We'll go, hey, look, the price of the program is just $6 a day, right? It's less than a cup of coffee and a biscuit or a chocolate bar, right? Per day. And then you're comparing that, and then people will often say, yes, okay, cool, I'll go with that.
It's that skill of minimizing, which is so powerful. And we really do get to experience this. And we're very spoiled in the sales team, because what that means is this all becomes part of our vetting process, right? So if somebody is, maybe they're incredibly defensive or resistant against being sold to, or maybe they just don't have a lot of money, right? Well, they can hash that out potentially in the conversation funnel or the DM sort of process. And I know for a fact that a lot of the time people will come into our calendars in the CRM and people will basically say, XYZ person said that they weren't interested in a paid program. When we broke it down daily, they were able to consider that amount. So it's a really effective tool that gets us on more calls with people that are in a position to buy.
Yeah, 100% correct. You brought up a good point here. It's like, it's really important that we're vetting our audience, because there's nothing worse, and you'll know this as a salesperson, hopping on a call to someone who's broke and lives in a trailer, because you need to be having opportunities. So this messenger conversation gives us the opportunity to get rid of people, right? So just to clarify, when we send them a booking link, that booking link has about 10 detailed questions that are going to categorize people based upon how much money they have, their occupation, and so forth. So we can actually choose to cancel, or if we're having a conversation, we feel it's going the wrong direction, it's not a qualified prospect, it's very, very easy for us to cancel. And we're probably looking at canceling, depending on what country you're in. In Australia, we probably cancel about the bottom 20%. In the US, it's probably more like the bottom 50% that we cancel.
Yeah. How do you feel about the idea, mate, of actually giving the listeners a copy of our pre-call questionnaire? Is that too much value for one episode?
No, I think that'll be really good. So pre-call questionnaire and the questions we ask.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's been a huge amount of changing with that as well, particularly that question where it's how much can you afford to invest towards a paid program if it meant you could achieve your goals? That question itself has gone through about 10 different generations. We've tried putting different options at the top, at the bottom, and the current iteration of that is the one that has been shown to be the most effective based on thousands and thousands and thousands of tests. So it's an incredibly powerful question. And I think something, once again, that would be extreme value, to anyone who's tuning in.
I do want to talk a little bit about that question. And it's just so direct. It's like, how much money could you afford to spend on a program per week if it meant that you achieved all of your goals? And we do have some modifications of that. And it's just really great because what you're doing here is, this would be a really, really great topic for an entire podcast as well, just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
What you're effectively doing is you're asking someone, hey, are you willing to buy? Because the options are, I can't afford anything, $20 to $40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 plus. And the whole point of this is as soon as you put that 20 to 40, pretty much everyone picks 20 to 40. You're excluding that bottom 20% who pick I can't afford anything. But and then, a lot of people will go 20 to 40 isn't enough, because obviously that's not even a category of payment that they're going to pay in the program.
Correct.
So
yeah.
Our research shows that all you need is to establish intent that that person is on the phone because they want to make a purchase.
That's actually the really intriguing thing from the sales side of things, is that when we first created this questionnaire, we used to get so excited when someone would write 80 plus on their form, and we would be like, when someone did 20 to 40. Psychologically, I think all that question really means is either I can't afford anything, or I'm not interested in affording anything, or I'm open to the idea of spending some money on this. But the amount of people that get on a sales call with our team who've chosen 20 to 40, and we sell them into the premium program, there's almost no statistical correlation between someone doing the premium for us, which is our top level program, and whether or not they chose 20 to 40 or 80 plus. It literally just means, from what we've found, yes, I'm open to the idea of discussing a paid program. But those questions are still really powerful, because I think if it just said, are you able to consider yes or no, I think people would be far more resistant to choosing yes. So it kind of gives them a level. It gives them a low level that they feel comfortable, but they don't feel like they've committed to anything too much. So they don't kind of get onto the call terrified that they might be locked in already.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a small amount of money. And where you actually probably lose money on this is when you put that number too high. So if you started that number at $50, you're cutting out so many of your leads. And you're exactly right. Probably about 80% of people pick that 20 to 40 category. Yeah. And of the people who we jump on the phone, we're closing 67, 68% at the moment, aren't we? About that number?
Yeah, exactly. So the statistics on the sales percentage, it's usually anything above 65% conversions, which for the fitness industry is bloody amazing.
Yeah, and for 80, as we said, 80% of people are picking 20 to 40.
Exactly.
And we're closing at 67%. So you do the maths that those people who select that category are going to close above 60% of the time.
Yeah. Now, obviously as well, you mentioned the $50, minimum limit, perfect world, that'd be great. But people always have to understand that there is a balance between quantity and quality. And most people, when they're starting out, they actually do have to kind of shift things in favor more of quantity, because they're just not going to have enough quantity of leads. Otherwise, beggars can't be choosers. And as you start to grow your reputation, your brand strength, and also put a bit more money in the bank account so you can afford to invest a little bit more in ad spend, then you can actually start shifting the balance a little bit more towards quality, and you can start being a little bit more harsh in your vetting process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For people just starting out, you should just be jumping on any call you get. And I think that one of the mistakes that people will make initially is they want to go, okay, well, I'm just going to charge $5,000 for my program. And the reality is, to charge $5,000 for a program, the level of trust that you need to establish is up here. You're not going to get people who drop that money without doing more research, and there's going to be far more uncertainty. However, if you've got a prospect who doesn't really want to give you much money, there's still the opportunity to sell them something and to just work those muscles, because at the end of the day, sales is a skill that you've got to learn, just as messaging is.
Yeah, I know we will definitely do a whole episode in the future on pricing. We do know a lot of the industry who basically do a $3,000 USD product, which is great, maybe more, 4,000.
And those 6,000, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, good on those people as well. But I think logically, it makes so much sense, right? Make more money per sale. But statistically, if your sales price goes up so high that you make far less sales, as long as you're actually managing the profit margins there. So for us, I know that we have a far bigger and more successful business than most of the people that are spouting that rule of hey, if you're choosing less than 3,500 per sale, you're a pussy. I hear people saying that all the time, and I just think it's bullshit. People need to relax on that. And it's more about how much profit, how many sales are you making? And you need to sort of find the fine line between the cost of your program and the volume of sales that you actually make, right?
But the thing is, we can't sell a $6,000 USD program to thyroid women who are struggling with their thyroids. Yeah. They're pre-qualified to not work. And, as far as fitness businesses go, we probably have we do have one of the most successful high ticket fitness businesses in the world.
Yeah.
And it's because we've found our marketplace. Just, you might want to charge $6,000 for a program, but there might be more opportunity to make more money at a lower level, just pumping more volume.
Yeah. I want to pull us back just on track towards the messenger conversation again, right? So let's say I'm just kind of getting started online and I'm going to go about setting up my messenger department. How long is that going to take me to do that on my own? And how long is it going to take me to do it if I've got access to your script?
So I think that setting it up on your own, it is a matter of getting everything sort of sorted, getting things organized and making it about yourself. So having some sort of basic element there. So the main thing to think about here, and on this script, just to clarify, it is just the questions of like what we ask. You're going to have to fill in the bits where you share about yourself. You're going to have to fill in the bits where you make you acknowledge what your prospect is saying. So in terms of setting that up, like I'd really sit there and really think about, you've got the questions that get asked, but really think about what's in your prospect's head, what you want to talk to about with people. And I'd also have a look at the current conversations that you've got going at the moment and grab snippets from all of those and use them and start creating like a Bible, a series of, a book that has every single way that you can answer each of those questions. Because at the end of the day, this is something that you can outsource to a staff member or an offshore virtual assistant. Obviously, leveraging the fact that you're paying them about 15% of what you'd pay for someone in your own, someone from Australia, US or UK country, so that they can actually fulfill that, messaging system.
Yeah, this is the absolute definition of a high priority task that isn't exactly something that the business owner wants to do long term. It can be time consuming at scale, but that is the absolute reason why this is so essential to be systemized. You must have a process that you can give to somebody, maybe like a VA, offshore VA, and then as soon as they are operating the system as well as you could have, then it's time for you to move up to a higher level task. So I think that, that system is just crucial and people can't be operating without it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's like, and again, it's very much about where you are at in business. You don't want to go hiring people because every time you hire someone, there's going to be a loss of percentage, right? So like, if you're on the phone AP and you're closing at like 90%, that when you hire a salesperson for the majority of the time, they're not going to convert as well as you do.
That's right. Hires in a business, and we made this mistake as well, but hires are a privilege, right? So hires can be a problem for a number of reasons if you do it too soon. Number one, you're going to have to pay somebody, so some of your profits are now diminished. But also, and this one is probably the most damaging thing to your business potentially, is that the chances are that the person who you've hired isn't either potentially as good or maybe as passionate about your area of interest as you are. So if you have to pay them, but they don't do as good a job as you, then you're losing in two different dimensions there. So just make sure that you actually have the system set up well enough and cash in the bank so that your business isn't going to go down the toilet if this fails in the first week,
I'll explain this. Like, let's take easy numbers. You close at 80% over the phone. You bring on a staff member who closes at 40%, right? You're literally losing half of your money just by doing that. I know we had a chat about one of our clients in Systems by Design the other day, Andrew, who was talking about bringing on a salesperson and you just told him no.
That's right. Like Savage Closer, one of our really successful clients, and he was closing at 80 to 90%. And basically he wanted to move out of sales. And I just said, why do you want to move out of sales? And he's like, oh, well, I'm just kind of getting to the point where I sort of feel like I should be doing something else. And the first thing that we discussed is that he should absolutely be continuing to do the sales himself because he's a beast. It's going to be very hard for him to find somebody of his quality when the business is still at his level. So ideally, I directed him to go get a coach instead because coaches are usually a lot more affordable. And at the moment, with everything that's been going on this year, there's so many amazing coaches that are desperate for a secure job. So at the moment, I think your first hire, by the sounds of it, when it is the right time, it's probably going to be most likely either a VA or it's going to be a coach long before it's going to be, say, for example, a salesperson.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the VA can be leveraged, paying them 15% of what you pay yourself, staff member, in your country, right? So the ability to do that just changes everything. And it's the reason why we can sit there and have 26 VAs in our business. And, for them to get a return on money, they don't need to be booking very many people a week to justify their cost.
I think in the future, geez, we've pimped out so many episodes in the future, but I think another really amazing episode would be to actually discuss hiring, creating VA teams, and how you motivate and, when necessary, have discipline or KPIs to actually increase performance in that department. But just in terms of wrapping up this episode, man, is there anything else in terms of the messaging or the conversation funnel that you think is particularly necessary to discuss before we call this one?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. And I think that for me, the really important thing about this is congruent with everything else that you do. As soon as you go off script, we've had many people try and copy our messaging system, but it won't work for them unless you're not sharing my story isn't going to work. You've got to be specific. You've got to build this up. There are people out there who are closing $5,000 programs in Messenger. All we're doing is getting people booked on a call so they show up for the call. But I want you to think what's the difference if someone's closing $5,000 over Messenger? What is happening on that conversation for that to take place? It's up here. Yeah. And then people are going, I'm a great messenger. I've been messaging back and forth, but they're actually operating down here. They're just trying to book someone in for a call. So exactly the same as sales, you can be a person who's closing a program for $50 a week, or you can go out there and you can sell a business coaching program for $30,000. So totally different games. And don't be naive and think you can just come into the messaging game. You need to do enough to get people on a call, but it's a skill that just can be, leveled up and up.
Yeah, no, perfect. So it's been a great sort of discussion. Just recapping some of the key points. People need to have a messenger system so that they can effectively nurture people through the process of kind of the beginning of knowing who you are, not knowing too much about you. You need to get them talking about themselves, what their goals are, basically getting emotional responses out of them so that they feel like you're not just directly going up to them in the club and asking them to go home with you, right? So remember,
trust and a connection first.
That's right. You have to kind of put in your pre-game first, right? So now once you've done that, this is going to be very beneficial to a business owner because it's going to mean that from a sales perspective, that they're getting people who are showing up to their phone calls in a much greater percentage. Those people have already been somewhat vetted based on the conversation that occurred in the messenger sort of process. But also it means that they are really excited for the call because they feel that they've actually been spoken to at an individual level. So this as a financial benefit to the business owner is insane. And, you're insane if you don't implement it quickly into your processes.
Yeah. Make your prospects feel like people. And if you make them feel like people, they believe you're a person. And a transaction takes place between two people instead of them versus a bot or a computer or nothing. And trust is at the highest possible level.
No, I love it. So, all right. So we're going to have in the show notes, we're going to have the script, at least our part of the script, not obviously there's going to be parts to add into that. We're also going to have in the pre-call questionnaire. So they're going to be in the show notes. Let's wrap this one up. So thank you for tuning in and listening. Make sure that you go and give us a 5-star review on Spotify, iTunes, wherever the heck you're listening to us from. And I will see you on the next episode.
Catch you all later. Bye.